I'm Ed Karshner. I'm 44 years old. Today's date is February 20th, 2014, and the interview is taking place in Gallup, New Mexico. And Sunny is my, clan sister?
Correct, you are. Oh, you're my clan brother.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
My name. I'm sorry. My name is Sunny Dooley. I'm 52 years old. It is February 20th, 2014. I'm sitting in Gallup, New Mexico, and I'm related to Dr. Karshner as a really good brother that I've adopted into my family.
Okay, well, to start the interview, now that we've introduced ourselves in that way, Sunny, I would like for you to introduce yourself in the traditional way.
Yat e she ya twadik onje dine enjla. Twadik onje jilo e twadik eatni do be betotni do sensakani do oge do yo e dine e bek eta hishtet nike. Ado tapa ha e ya bashish chin e ya halso do tropajna aje. Ado kia ani e dashiche do tsana belni e ya dashinale do chejel tkaholye ada e ya nasha. Ado ada jagaho e ya the re this cheap is na holds this chikeda hat edahalni. Ada jagaho e ya na re that is ada e ya nasha.
And when you introduce yourself, there's a series of relationships. So in English, could you just explain what is in that, all of the relationships that are in that introduction that you just did?
You begin by saying your Matrilineal Clan, and my Matrilineal Clan is the Saltwater Clan, and that clan is related to the Bitterwater Clan, the Deer Springs People Clan, the Weaver Clan, the Bitterwater, I think I said Bitterwater Clan, the Cottonwood Grove People Clan, also meaning the Clump of Trees Clan, as well as the Bead Clan. My father's clan is by the Water's Edge Clan. They're related to the Grass Meadow people, as well as the two who went to the Water Clan. And then my father's clan is Tsenahabithni. That doesn't translate into English. And then my mother's father's clan is the Towering House Clan. And I am from a place that is called Where the Oaks Grow. And when you get there, they'll say, oh, they live over on the other side where there is a lot of pine trees in the valley. And then when you get to that place, they'll say, oh, she lives on that high ridge point. Okay. So that's where I'm from. And then usually you identify yourself with your elders, and then eventually you get to your own name. And if I was doing this in a context of storytelling, I really wouldn't even say my name. Because there's a little folk saying that says if you say your name too many times, your ears will dry up and fall off. Which means that you're just listening for your own name.
Okay. Well, along those lines, so when you identify yourself by clan, and then in the creation stories, each clan has its own creation story. And in addition, as you pointed out, each family has its own story of how it came to be and where it is. So how do these stories create and to a certain extent reveal who you are as a human being?
A lot. Originally, the Navajo people had 4 clans that was created for us by Yolke Sanadle, which is a white bead, ever-changing woman. And she developed these clans in the middle of the third world, I would say, when we were living in the yellow world. And it was to create harmony and balance and peaceful dealings with one another, because we were becoming earth-surfaced at that time. Prior to that time, we weren't quite, like earth-surface people. And so she developed these 4 clans, and these 4 clans were Twitich'itni, Bitterwater, Kia'ani, Towering House, Hanagahni, the one who walks around you. And then there's always, depending on what part of the Navajo Nation you come from, some people will say Hashlishni, the Mud Clan, and then other people will say Bit'ahni, the one, but Ani doesn't really translate into English either. So wherever you are on the reservation, the 4 clans will be different. But she was the one who gave us these clans, and as they came into this land that was all yellow, each clan began to travel, migrate, and journey. And so the Bitterwater clan came upon my clan, the Saltwater people clan. And it doesn't mean that we live by salt water. It just means that we lived by a natural spring, an artesian spring. And that water was very satisfying and delicious. And so that's how we got the name Todekonje. And then as the clans continued to migrate and travel, they came upon each of the matrilineal clans that I mentioned. And so you have your clan story, and then you will have your genealogy story. And that genealogy story goes back to your great-great-great-great-grandparents on both sides of your mother's side and your father's side. That's the genealogy. And then you find out there are people in that story of your genealogy that have attributes. They did certain things. They made possibilities for you. And so you remember their strengths. You also remember their weaknesses. And so as you're growing up as a person, then you kind of know what you have in you to persevere. And then also you sort of know your family's weaknesses. So you have to understand that and navigate around it. Is that how you would say it?
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah. So like there's weaknesses in my family that I know are there. And so as an individual, I have to, I know that. And so if that particular situation comes up and I begin to display my character weaknesses, it's like, oh yeah, you have a genealogy like this, so you better stop and think about it. You know, so then you kind of go around your weaknesses rather than keep displaying it, because culturally we believe that what you say, like as I'm speaking to you, the possibility of it manifesting itself is going to happen. And what I say is going to affect my grandchildren. So I have to be careful with what I say. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, and that actually takes us into the next question. Because now we can actually start to talk about storytelling a little bit. Joseph Farella writes in his book on Navajo philosophy that Navajo stories, quote, describe experience, and in that sense they create it. If a person listens to the stories, thinks about them, and relates them to his own life, he will necessarily perceive that they are true. Having learned this, he will experience more. Having experienced more, he will understand the stories better, and so on, end quote. So with this idea of storytelling in mind and what you just talked about earlier, what do you see as the responsibility of a storyteller, and who or what are you responsible to?
I'm responsible to the story. The Navajo people have so many stories. It's interesting because when I went to school, like elementary and junior high school and college, you know, there's stories that are in books. And I read stories from books. They began and ended, and then you close the covers. And in my mind, that's how I sort of view a story that is not Navajo. A Navajo story is unending. It continues. And the reason why it continues is because we originate from story. And we tell the story. We talk the story. We say the words of the story. And because it's spoken, it's alive, it's living. And the fact that in our story we're told, di nazad ba'aholya, di nazad kajo'o alketsan tnil, meaning watch your words and watch how you speak your words. It really has a deep meaning and implication for a storyteller. Because when I tell a story, you go there and you sense the people. They'll kind of say, they'll always say, this is the kind of story we want, And so you're, okay, all right. And then you look around, you see the building, you look inside, you see the chairs, the tables, the walls. Then the people start coming in, they start greeting you. And then you begin the story and you tell the story. And then somewhere what they need becomes incorporated into the story. And they hear it, and it validates them, and it fortifies them, it nourishes them, and then it makes them want to be well. So stories are viewed as a way to get well. So our stories are long, and there's multiples of them. There's all kinds of stories. And so it's like when I tell a story, I feel a big responsibility to make sure I tell what needs to be told. And they always say that your ancestors sit on the rim of your ear and they help you say those words. So stories are alive. Stories continue, stories evolve, and stories never end. And I think a lot of times as a quote-unquote professional storyteller, when I go to tell a story with a non-Navajo audience, they expect it to be like the kind of storytelling you hear at a storytelling festival. And our stories are different from that. And we heal ourselves with story because each of our ceremonies, there's a chanter, and I am not a chanter. I am not a healer. I'm a teller. The chanter can be asked at the time of the beginning of the ceremony, tell us the story that goes with the ceremony. So it's usually a man. There are some women who chant. I've only seen men chanters. They'll sing, they'll pray, they'll do ritual, they'll do herbal remedies, they'll do a number of different things, and then in there they connect all these separate pieces with story. And you can actually be healed without the story in a chant ceremony, but it just makes it richer if you ask for the story.
And that's something that and I want to come back to that idea of story and ceremony in a minute, but this is something that we've sort of talked about, that there's a different kind of aesthetic to Navajo storytelling versus, like you said, a book, what's in an Anglo book or a Western book. And I think one of those, and this is a nice college couple of words, but liminal aesthetics, to this idea where, even as you were pointing out in a previous answer, that even we in the West, we tend to think of only like there has to be a positive message, but as you were just pointing out, even a negative message can have a positive consequence. Where if you know that where there's a negativity in your family, in the Anglo world, we would tend to want to bury that and only think happy thoughts. But there's a happy thought that can come out of the negativity, though, right?
Well, in order for positivity to happen, there has to be negativity. There has to be both sides. And I think the object of being, a person living on the surface of the earth in balance with their lives is to accept both sides. You think about Native American history all across the United States of America. It's not very positive. Yet we're still here as Native American people. And I think of my own historical history that's written in the books and recorded by, the officers that came here with the military, and then just everything that has happened since we were quote unquote discovered. First by the Spanish 500 some odd years ago, and then when gold was discovered in California, they had to come through our area, and so that's like the early 1800s, etc. So there's all that negativity, yet today in 2014, I would say a majority of Navajo people aren't stuck on the negativity. They have taken steps to heal themselves within the cultural ceremonial context so that they can live a positive life. And the family genealogy stories, the family historical stories, the family clan stories, those are all attributes of putting positivity into your kids, into your next generation, because we're speaking for your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. You're speaking, is that 3 generations ahead or 4 generations ahead? You're talking for them. So that balance of negativity and positivity has to always be present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I sort of feel like I didn't really.
No, I think that's it's one of the things when I teach like the creation story to my students, they're always surprised by the kind of the raw honesty that's in the creation story, the adultery and of the air spirit people and all of that kind of, and it's shocking to them, and it's like, but what, but they don't see because again, we want to avoid that kind of the negative stuff and pretend like it didn't happen, but in the Navajo way, it's like, no, that's the way it was. No, like you said, what are you going to do about it becomes the important question.
Yeah. And maybe to make it better understandable, like the first time I heard the story of Cinderella,
mm-hmm.
I came home and I told my great-grandmother, I said, there's this fabulous story I heard at school, and it's about this girl. And I did not view her situation as negative, even though she was a slave-like creature to her stepsister and stepmother. I saw her as a really resilient, hardworking, independent young lady who lived in harmony with all of her environment, that she was able to tame the rodents and the birds and the animals to help her make a dress, and then, she gets rescued by this prince man. And in our culture, in all of our stories, there is not a story where a woman is rescued by the masculine energy. And there isn't the princess idea either. Men aren't out to rescue women. And so this was a real interesting concept that some man can come and rescue me, And so I told that to my great-grandmother. I said, I'm going to continue to work hard. I see na shnishtonsen ako hadada hastile some man is going to come to my house because he's seeing me as a hardworking person, and he's going to carry me away on his horse to his house. And my grandmother listened to the story, and she's like, oh, that Dita Lagana Bahanet, this is the story of the white people. And I said, yeah, it seems to be. and later on that evening, she told me, she says, it's not a good thing for your husband she said, it's not a good thing for a woman to go to her husband's homestead. If she does that, she will be a slave forever, because she will be at the beck and call of her husband's mother. And they might not allow her to come back to visit her mother. And then she said, what if it turns out that this man who rescues you turns out to be enormously selfish and stingy? Then what? Even your own hard work will go into his hands. And you have no say-so over it because you are a slave at his homestead. So she told me, she said, if you ever get married, the man comes and lives here and maintains your wealth because you're wealthy. And I thought, oh, I am? And she said, look outside. You have horses. There's sheep. There's goats. You have cats and dogs. That's not wealth. You have a home. You have a cornfield. And I never, at that point in time in my life, I didn't think those things were mine because we don't really have a concept of this is mine, because that's a selfish thing, And then, but I felt like, oh, I am a part of this big family, and family is wealth. No matter what they do, they're your wealth, So all of that is related to the question you asked.
No, my mom used to tell me that too. The only thing you have are your brothers.
Yeah, that's true. You mean warts and all. You have to clean them.
Well, along those, going back to I want to go revisit this idea of the relationship of story to ceremony. And our mutual friend Paul Zolbrod has spent his career making a case that for way too long, scholarship has focused too narrowly on Navajo ceremony only as ritual, and then looking at Navajo story merely as myth. And he makes, I think, a compelling case that story and ceremony, and you've actually already addressed this to a certain extent, that story and ceremony supply each other with context for receiving and transmitting traditional knowledge. So do you see the storyteller as part of the Navajo ceremonial system? And if so, where would you place the storyteller in that larger ceremonial system?
We're not a part of the ceremonial system. Everything in Navajo is masculine and feminine, okay? So for a majority period of time, the ceremonial rituals have always been masculine. And most recently, like in my mother's lifetime, I don't think there was a medicine woman that was a chanter. In my lifetime, within the past 25 years, I have encountered 3 Navajo women chanters, and one doesn't practice anymore. I'm not sure about the other one. And then the one that I saw last year, she was limiting her practice pretty much only to dressing the coming of age girl in the Kinalta ceremony. So she was saying she was getting older and elderly. And so in my lifetime, I've encountered mostly only men chanters. And when they come to my home, we ask them, please tell us the story as you're chanting. And so that's where the story is. Now, for me, I started telling stories 30 years ago, and it was really bold and unusual because my profession began because I saw an Anglo woman tell Navajo stories at the library out of season, because we tell stories only in the wintertime. And she was telling a winter story in July. And I said, oh, who told you to do this? Where did this story come from? How did you get permission to? And then she told me she read it in a book and she memorized it. And so that's how she was telling the story. And I never knew you could be a storyteller, like as a job. So I took that idea, and then just the fact that in my culture, where I come from my clan, women have told stories. But those stories were told to discipline and to teach. And so I thought, if I take those stories that I was raised with and couple it with what this lady does, is it possible for me to be a teller? And you can travel around the Navajo Nation, and I think I was probably the first one to do that. And it felt really weird at the beginning, but I had to get permission to do it. And I did it at the time when I realized so many Navajo kids in the schools had never ever heard a Navajo story in their life. And that was in 1992. And I asked 9 kids in a classroom one time, that at your home, do you hear story? And then one little boy says, no, we don't have a home. And I looked at him and I said, you don't have a home? And he goes, no, I don't have a home. We just rent a house, an apartment, and it's from month to month. And I said to him, oh, so what do you know? Are you Navajo? And he says, oh, I'm Navajo. He says, but the only thing I know about my culture is if a coyote runs in your path, you have to stop and some other car has to pass you. That's all I know. And that was really surprising to me. And so I asked my mom, I asked 2 other clan brothers who were chanters. They reluctantly agreed because stories are considered family wealth. And one clan brother said, this is your strength. Why do you want to give it away? And I had to go back all the way to a story that I heard from my Nalahasti. And I said, you remember when all the animals, birds, reptiles, and insects lost their voices? And there was nobody there to teach the children. And they just would shrug their shoulders and cross their eyes and twiddle their thumbs. And I said, that's where we're at now. We've lost our voice because we don't know our stories. And so I started doing that, and I think I have been everywhere on the Navajo Nation except to Denahozo, Arizona. That's the only school I haven't told yet at today. But I've been practically to every school, to a whole bunch of chapter houses, and this is how you begin. And within the past, I would say 7 years, there's been more tellers, but they talk about story. They don't tell the story. Mm-hmm. There's a difference.
Yeah, and what is that? How would you characterize that difference? Because I've noticed that too, the difference between telling and talking about.
Yeah, what I just talked to you about the birds, the bluebird and how the people lost their voices, I'm talking about the story. Now, if I transitioned it, then I would be the bluebird. I become the bluebird, and I would sing her song. And then I become that critter. And I tell the story from their point of view.
And then the audience becomes part of that story, and they become characters in the story too, then?
No, they just listen. I think they just listen. For example, I don't think I take on I it's not like I'm mimicking anybody in the audience, but like just as an example, you heard about me talking about the bluebird story. So this is the actual story. So I would say, Yana no paye nigo nita. She flew, singing this song, and she sat on top of a juniper tree. Ado dei, and she looked. She looked into all 4 directions, and she said, this is where the story begins. Where have my relatives gone? There's nobody here. And so I am the bluebird's voice. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
No, again, it goes back to it's a fascinating aesthetics. I mean, I know we've talked about that a lot. It's just it's completely different, and it's so much more interactive and meaningful than just this sort of passive reception of or transmission and reception of words. It's something much more than that.
And so in that story, there's several characters, and you imitate each of those characters, and so that's how you tell the story.
Well, I think we just to wrap up all of this. This is kind of one of those catch-all questions. But so since as we've discussed the differing ways, and we have off and on, the way that storytelling is understood by the Navajo and then perceived by Anglo culture, and you talked a little bit about that when you saw the Anglo storyteller telling Navajo stories. So. And I know this is a loaded question, but could you then, based on kind of just all the things that we've talked about, define storytelling as you understand what it is that you do? And if you want to contrast that with, again, perceptions, that's fine too.
Say it again.
Could you define storytelling as you understand what it is that you do?
Okay. I define storytelling as a tool to nourish and amplify and digest and acknowledge and validate and fortify and strengthen a person. I see it as a living quality. I see it as a spoken quality. I don't see storytelling as a long time ago since, because that's one of the things I notice with a lot of tellers is they'll begin a story a long time ago. Our stories begin with when the birds, animals, reptiles, and insects all could speak like us, and it ends presently. There's never an end. It continues. So our stories are ever evolving, and we're not stuck in the old days. One of the things that I think was interesting, and this is a really broad kind of contrast, but I grew up with the old Lone Ranger and Tonto black and white TV show, How Kemosabe, and then there's this new one with what's the dude's name?
Johnny Depp.
Yeah, Johnny Depp. He played the Indian part, and then there was I don't know who Lone Ranger was, but anyway, that guy, and then. And I don't have, I never saw the movie, but I wasn't offended, that they're remaking the Lone Ranger. It's okay, because we all need to update our memories, so to speak. And I think a lot of people are stuck in their mindset about what a Native American story and storyteller should be. And I know I disappoint a lot of people because I'm very current and present, because that's how our stories are. We evolve through the black world, the blue world, the yellow world. We're living in the changing world, glittering world. We have 2 more worlds to evolve into. And the teller has to maintain that stream so that when we get to that 6th and final world, all of this, whatever is remembered, whatever is valued and transferred and kept, will be told then. And in the 6th world, who will be the voice of what survives? I don't know.
No, I think you make it, and that's an interesting point that you make, that, and it's not timelessness in the sense that these stories never go out of style, but when you say that you are, that you disappoint some because you're such a modern lady, but at the same time, though, you're like the stories themselves, because you're not. You're also really old school. I mean, you're very traditional in a new kind of way, and the stories have that. And when you are those stories, you embody that.
Yeah, because
quality.
The story is always the same, has the same words, has the same quality, teaches the same lessons, but some of the things that happen in 2014 might be the same situation, but they happened in 1950, they happened in 1850, they happened in 1750, and we just have to change maybe the hue of it, so that people can relate to it. But they're all the same. And that's in telling. In ceremonial context, it's the same. It's the same how it was back then. You know, that part never changes. They do the same chants, they do the same prayers, they do the same ritual, they do the same sand paintings. Everything there is the same. The telling changes. So, because telling was a woman's craft in disciplining her children. And my mom had 9 kids. And she had to discipline 9 different ways using the same story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to listen to a lot of stories because I'm 13.